So again, clean slate people, we're here with Raaheela, Ahmed, and we're talking about the ramifications of some of the actions and decisions on the state level towards the Prince George's County uniquely and our school board, and what the possible issues are that are created through legislation like this and actions like this. Raaheela, can you please continue with what you were discussing?
Sure. So when I first came on the board, I was elected in 2016 and began my term in December of 2016. And what became very apparent within the first 6 months of me serving is a lot of folks started coming to me and some of my new colleagues on the board saying, oh, hey, we're really just passing students. We're not actually teaching students for them to be prepared for the future. And folks are just signing off to allow them to pass, to graduate, and it's not actually real or true. And the issue that became a huge issue that resulted in us going to the governor, asking for support to conduct an audit being done, and then finding out that we were graduating hundreds of students that should not have graduated, that did not fulfill the requirements for graduation. And so in a structure in which the superintendent, board leadership, several board members are all appointed by the county executive, there is a benefit in not stirring the pot and in not calling things out for what they are, and in not investigating sometimes things that need to be investigated. And so this grade fixing situation was something that came about that was consistently denied by leadership, that this is not happening. But it was found that we were actually doing it, whether it was willful or unwillful on their part, it was happening. And that created a big issue. The other issue that I think really hits the hearts of people is that school closings, the board has no real authority over under these changes. The superintendent can close a school without a board vote, and it has happened. Skyline Elementary School in Forestville High School were two schools that were shut down before I came on the board. And at this point in time, there are considerations for possible closure of a couple of schools in my district based upon a boundary analysis that was done, 2 elementary schools. What has also happened recently within the past 2 months, I would say 2 or 3 months, is that there was a consolidation of alternative schools in our school district. So, and the issue with that is that at every single budget hearing that we had, there were probably a dozen or more folks that came out that said, please do not consolidate these schools because our students are performing well in the structure that exists. We're having really good retention and graduation rates as a result of the individual one-on-one attention we're able to provide in these settings. Students, former students coming saying, this school has changed my life. And still, those schools were consolidated. Granted, this happened with the board vote, but it happened with the board vote after myself and another colleague had resigned, after the appointed members had more of a power as a result of the dynamic shift. And these are some of the things that really, cause concern, because now we're going against the will of the people that are coming to us. And if you had an elected body, then I think you would hear and have a lot of those concerns resolved before it got to these types of points. So school closings is one clear key issue that is of concern. Not having things audited or looked at properly because of the structures that be is another concern. Beyond that, board members, elected board members have tried to push for very key and important things and were pushed back on with the term of, okay, well, you know, you need a supermajority vote to do this because it's against the recommendation or the action of the superintendent. One of those things was significant reform to dismantling the school to prison pipeline. We had discussed this at several different board meetings over the course of 2 years. I had brought forward a proposal that would have looked comprehensively at altering our structure as it relates to where our school security, removing armed officers, about 30 armed officers from our school buildings, ensuring that we had an oversight committee for school disciplinary matters from the community, making sure that we're collecting data, and then also ensuring that we would have mental health supports for students. It was a whole big package deal. And that did not pass, even though the majority of my colleagues agreed, even though we had a majority vote, because we did not have supermajority vote and it wasn't in the likes of the superintendent, that measure did not pass. And so that's another example of we could have been doing some really great things for dismantling the school to prison pipeline that we didn't do because of the rules that the state legislature has passed. Another example is equity learning hubs. One of my colleagues was very keen during the beginning of the pandemic, or mid-pandemic, I would say, probably a year into the pandemic, saying we need to have in-person instruction for our students that are at the margins because they're not learning it the same way, and the supports need to be there to be able to allow for the education that we know we can provide. We need to provide for students. That issue was delayed in passing, partially because of concerns from different leaders in the school system, but also because the board chair decided to cancel meetings. And which, by the way, by law, we're supposed to have meetings every month. There's something specific that says we need to be meeting, but decided to just indefinitely cancel meetings. There were a couple of things on that agenda that we were supposed to look at, in addition to equity learning hubs, that would have benefited taxpayers and the school system, that were never brought back. Equity learning hubs came back and was voted on, and we were able to move forward. But other things, like we tried to do an audit of special education that was on there. We tried to bring in somebody that would help us review the proposals that were coming forward for school construction to make sure we were using our money properly. Those things never came back, even though those are probably things that we needed to do. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of the structures that be and how they directly affect people. It took us months to try and get that equity learning hubs passed. Imagine if we were able to do that earlier and be able to provide extra services for students that needed it in the pandemic. So these are just a couple of examples, but there's many, many more of how a structure that doesn't have proper checks and balances doesn't work for people and doesn't work for us.